of Richmond and Henrico moved 350,000 people out. So that district becomes a Richmond district now, which means we have essentially two congressmen that we're going to have for this district. One's going to be 3rd District, Bobby Scott. And actually, I get along with Bobby okay. We differ on 80% of the issues. But the reality is when we have to fight for military issues, Bobby will come alongside and support us on those issues. But he doesn't have any connectivity to any of the committees that make decisions on the military, and he would admit it. That leaves the 2nd District. And here's the big 3 challenges we have. These curve lines I was telling you about are killing us. We've got to change those curve lines. The second thing, though, is BRAC. And BRAC, you all know, it's Base Realignment Closure Commission. We're going to have another round of BRAC. The President has said it. He's put it in his budget. He said he's going to do it whether Congress agrees with it or not. It's not just Oceana that's going to be in those crosshairs. It will be in the crosshairs. But I'll tell you, there are 2 or 3 other major facilities that we think are going to be even more at risk than Oceana. It makes no sense for us to not have somebody that's going to be in the room to do that. And we will have admirals, generals who are coming in, who step in a plate and saying, this is crucial to this area and protecting it and keep this chairmanship. Last thing that I'll tell you is this. You all know that our friends from Florida have been looking at these commands, not just recently, but for 20 years. Somebody asked me the other day, if you lose this chairmanship, do you think Florida will be in line to get these assets? I said, no, they've been in line for 20 years. The question is whether or not we're going to be at the front of the line, John, you know this, or the back of the line. So we'll bring in guys who are head of naval research, we'll bring in guys that have commanded vessels, we'll bring in secretaries and Navy who will tell you, we lose that, we're going to lose an aircraft carrier, we're going to lose something else, and most of you guys know, sir, you know that's just the nature of the beast. Last thing I want to share with you is this. This is different to different people. And I have had people tell me to stay out of this all my political career, but I've never done it because it's just as much a part of my principles as anything else. When we talk about shaping our future comes from safety, sometimes it comes from our jobs, but sometimes it comes from what we believe in, too. I'm happy for some of the principles that I believe in. I've got 100% pro-life rating. I like that. I'm glad of that. It's been in my DNA since I started. I've got an A rating, and it'll soon be an A+ rating with the NRA for a lifetime, not just for a couple of years. In addition to that, I've got the hero of the American Taxpayer from the American Taxpayer Reform group, and I'm proud of that. But let me tell you another issue. We don't get to pick our amendments. First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Second Amendment, they're all rights for a reason. And one of them is the First Amendment and the ability to express your faith across the country. Now, whether you have any faith or not, that's your choice. But for those who elect to have it, the political correctness in this country is gone off the charts. When I looked at this principal and athletic director in Pensacola, Florida, that were hauled into federal court, threatened to go to jail for 6 months, to have their retirement taken away, and to be fined $5,000. You know what their travesty was? The principal looked at the athletic director at a Boosters Club off-school property and simply said, "Will you offer a blessing over the luncheon?" And for that, they were hauled into federal court with that real threat. When I look at that young boy in the Air Force Academy who simply wrote a Bible verse on his whiteboard outside his door, and the Air Force took him to task and said, "This is against the leadership principles of the Air Force," that's too much political correctness. And when Joe Kennedy, a former Marine for 20 years, good football coach, they fired him. And you know why they fired him? Not because he wasn't a good football coach, not because he wasn't a good person, not because he wasn't a good mentor, but because he dared to go on the football field after a game and simply offer a prayer, thanking God for protecting his players and the players on the other team, and Washington and Bremerton fired him. So 10 years ago, I realized this political correctness was coming to our country. And again, like I told you, based my life on not just having the right vision and the commitment, but getting in positions that we could stop it. One person couldn't do that. But I formed the Congressional Prayer Caucus. Now we have 100 members in that. And we've been fighting these issues around the country. We've gone from us to now 27 different states who have prayer caucuses. It's going to be 14 more. And when that principal and athletic director in Florida was hauled into federal court, we were there for him. We wrote an op-ed piece. They dismissed that case. We're standing with Joe Kennedy now. The Air Force has redone their protocols for FATE now because we stood up to them and fought to do it. I think that's an important thing for us to do. And like I said, I don't care whether you have any faith or not. I just want to make sure that my little daughter, my granddaughter, that she has the opportunity to make the same choices you and I had to make when she comes along at a later day. So I've talked for a long time. Let me thank you for letting me be here, and let me now throw it open to you for any questions that you've got. And here come the questions.
Who else has any questions?
People were actually nice enough to print, so I
Oh,
think
that, you know, that's always great.
you'll be able to read these.
Oh, you can read it? Okay. Okay, this first one is this. When you took office, the national debt was $5.6 trillion. It's now $19.6 trillion. What legislation have you introduced to curb the potential bankruptcy of our nation? Great question, and let me tell you, I hear people all the time saying, what legislation did you put in? I have got friends of mine that love to do this. They will file a piece of legislation, send out a press release and say, look what I filed, isn't that great? And I'm sitting there and saying, well, that's wonderful, that's really stopping the avalanche of what we have. And let me just tell you, it's more than about pieces of legislation that we have, it's what do you actually do? What can we do as individuals to stop this spiraling debt that we have? And look, the country's out of control in terms of its spending. Part of that is because of the budgets we have, but it's not just the budgets. Part of it's because of these regulations you put on, because every time I put a regulation on a business, I'm raising the cost of that business to do what they have as well. So first of all, there are times when you do need to just vote no. There are times when there is no alternative that you have other than just stepping up no matter what pressure is on you and saying, I'm going to vote no. But one of the big things that are driving our debt are these bailouts that we have been doing. And look, they were under President Bush, and they were also under President Obama, and one was just as bad as the other one. And so under President Bush, what you had is most Republicans voted for that one, and most Democrats voted against it. Under Obama, you had most of the Democrats voted for it, most of the Republicans voted against it. There were 17 of us that voted no under all of them. I was one of the 17, and I will tell you, there was enormous pressure at that time to vote for those bailouts, and we didn't do it. Second thing is, when sequestration came in, I thought sequestration was a stupid way to do this. Now look, I believe in reducing our budget, but not this arbitrary across-the-board thing that we did to defense, and most of it was for national defense. I voted against sequestration even though the Speaker of the House tried to force me to vote for it and tried to say that you had to do it, and I said no. In fact, one time I even had, they were threatening to take away my chairmanship, and I said, okay, go ahead and do it, but you have to go to the committee and you argue this, and they're going to revolt against you. And so they didn't do it, but I voted against that. Third thing is, I've always supported, will continue to support a balanced budget agreement, because I think we have to have that. We have to get to the point, balanced budget agreement. Remember, we had an opportunity where to pass the House and went to the Senate back in the 90s, failed by just 2 votes. And can you imagine the difference in our country if that balanced budget amendment had passed in the 90s with where we would be today? But the other thing is, part of it is getting the accountability. I have co-patroned a bill that would audit the Federal Reserve, because I think we need to have them accountable. But in addition to that, I've not only co-patroned a bill that would audit the Department of Defense, but I fought to get an audit of the Department of Defense. And look, there's no greater supporter of defense than I am here, but I think taxpayers have the right to have transparency, to know where those dollars are being spent, because if we're spending them on social engineering in the Department of Defense instead of on lethality, we need to change that around and get that done. The other thing I did write myself and put in was a bill that would say, if you don't get spending under control, and you do whatever spending you want, but if the spending is more than the amount that you take in, by that percentage, you ought to reduce members of Congress' salary by whatever that same percentage is. I think that will be certainly an incentive to get them to the table to say maybe we ought to control it just a little bit. So they're the things that we have fought for and continue to fight for. If I could just a moment talk about this regulatory thing. See, the problem with the regulations is this: they're so subtle sometimes, but they increase our cost enormously. Any project we want to build. You know, if you want to build a highway or a bridge in Virginia today, and you can put a bike path on there, you have to do it as long as it's less than 20% of the cost of the project. Now, I'm a big supporter of bike paths, but not with federal dollars like that, because here it is. They have one project The bridge is 95 foot tall, and they insisted on putting a bike path on the bridge. Any of you in here are going to ride a bike up 95 feet in the air, but much less do you want to ride a bike down 95 feet in the air. It costs $18 million. And the federal government, the state government both say you've got to have that on there if you can do it. That's insanity for us. So one of the things that we've tried to do is hold back some of these regulations. And one bill that I did support, continue to support, is the REINS Act. Here's what the REINS Act says. It says if they're going to put a major regulatory regulation out that's going to impact businesses, Congress needs to vote for it up or down before it goes into effect. You can't just implement it by agencies out there. I think that would be important in helping to control the regulations that we have. Okay, next question is this. When is the last time the DOD was audited? DOD has never been audited. It's never been audited. There is a statutory requirement that they audit DOD. They have just failed to do it. But I can show you the tapes where I held them accountable for that. I can tell you what they're now doing. I had one of the secretaries of defenses, and it wasn't a pretty hearing, but I actually had him in hearing and talked about the audit. He told me all of the stuff that they were doing, and I put up something on the screen in the Armed Services Committee, and I said, Mr. Secretary, I said, isn't this what you said 10 years ago? And, or the Department of Defense said 10 years ago. He said, yes. He said, but it's not what we're saying now. And I said, this is streaming live from your website. Obviously, it came down in about 30 minutes, but here's where we've moved with the Department of Defense. Where we've moved with them now is that they are on a path, and they are moving towards getting those audits done in different provisions of the Department of Defense. They're moving faster than they were, but it is a battle. We have to hold their feet to the fire, because here's what I worry about. Again, big supporter of national defense, but if you are spending, I will tell you, they spent a lot of money on social engineering. General Kelly, General Mattis had the best line I felt. I was with them a few weeks ago. They said, look, we have to understand, at the base of what we do in national defense, it's about lethality. I mean, we don't like to talk about that. The military is not there to be our PR people around the world. They're there for lethality. And both of these generals said this: if it isn't increasing lethality, we shouldn't be doing it, because it's taking away dollars that should be increasing our lethality. So I think the auditing is important so that Americans can know where they're spending their dollars, but also we can make sure they're going to increasing the lethality that we've got. But it's never been audited. How do you think we can, how many carrier air wings and carriers can we afford? Everything's about priorities. The question is this. You remember one of those bailouts was President Obama's bailout. It was about $825 billion plus or minus in bailout. In addition, it was about $347 billion of interest. I said the day it was passed, not 6 months later, I said this money is coming out of national defense. It's almost the same overlay of the cuts they made to national defense. And I've gone around the country and I've asked people, tell me if any of you got any of that money from that bailout bill. I had one person in California who raised their hand. He was a hotel owner. He said, we got some of the money. And then I said, well, you're the first. He said, but let me finish. He said, what we got it for is not what we needed it for. We got it for this, I don't know, some crazy solar thing that they had. But he said, that's not where we needed the money. We didn't get anything that really helped us. That money just took us off course, and it made it so that we couldn't do what we needed for national defense. You don't hear that term sequestration, dirty word, bad word for defense. What you don't hear the papers write about, because they were silent when this was happening. This administration cut $780 billion out of national defense before they ever got to sequestration. And most of it came because they shifted it somewhere else. You've heard me talk before about the need for additional ships in the Navy and stuff that we had. And somebody will always come up and say, oh my gosh, how can we afford that? It's only about 1.5% shift in the defense budget, and we can build the ships that we need. That's not a big shift. It's about priorities and where we go. And as I mentioned earlier, if we don't get national defense right, none of this matters. So how many can we afford? Here's the question, and they answered it in one of our hearings just a couple of weeks ago. This administration has been letting its budget office determine the national defense strategy for this country. It ought to be the other way around. We ought to determine the strategy we need to keep us safe, and then build a budget to comply with that, not the other way around. If I do that, we have got to have a minimum of 11 carriers, and if we have 11 carriers, we've got to have 10 carrier air wings. This president wanted to take us down to 10 carriers. He wants right now, and in his budget, he wants to take us down to 9 carrier air wings. The problem with taking these 4 structures down is this. Once we take it down, you can never build it back up again. So that's why we're fighting like the dickens. Almost every single major military analyst that I talk to says the same thing. Randy, if you can keep it alive, we can build it back up when we get a president who will do it. Let them destroy it, and we can. Last thing, it's not just defending our country, it is the men and women who serve. If we go down to 10 carriers, you add 2.5 months of deployment on every single sailor that goes out on one of those carriers. That is a killer when it comes to retention and keeping those guys and gals in the fight. Okay. The next one is, how do you feel you will be able to work with the presumptive nominees, Trump or Clinton? I can't work with Clinton. I will have to fight against Clinton. You guys know that. I mean, look, it's just like Obama. Now, here's one thing. I can be civil and polite, but I'm not going to go in and think, okay, we're going to find some middle of the road. They don't want to find a middle of the road. Obama's never wanted to find a middle of the road on anything. Here's the Obama philosophy of compromise. You do everything I want you to do, and I'll pat you on the back for doing it. We're not going to do that. So what we're going to have to do if it's Hillary Clinton is we're going to have to draw lines in the sand. But I'll tell you this, I'm not going to just give a speech and send out a press release. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't exist. What I'm going to try to do is what I've done all my life. I'm going to bring anybody together that will work with me. I'm going to try to develop strategies for how we do it. I'm going to be willing to put the commitment in, and I'm going to try to make sure we can get in positions to stop her from doing some of the things that she's going to try to do. If they only listed Trump, but let me just say it could be Trump, it could be Cruz. I don't know who that person's going to be. I'm not that smart to figure that out. My guess is very few people know that. The thing that I'll just tell you is whoever the Republican nominee is, it's going to be better than the Democratic nominee. And one of the things that I think we forget sometimes, it's not just about the person that sits in the Oval Office. It's about all the people they appoint to all of these places. And I'll tell you this, look, they may play some games that I absolutely hate if they appoint people to some of these agencies that I don't like. But if they'll give us the right people in the Department of Defense, I can help build this military back up to where it needs to be. I don't have to have the president sitting there every day to do it. I just need him to have the right people, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Navy, and those kind of things for us to be able to do it. So I hope that we will get a Republican nominee that will ultimately win. And whoever that nominee is, I'm going to help them. And I pray it won't be Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. And let me just tell y'all this. I'm just going to tell you, and you guys know this. Listen to what Bernie Sanders is saying. Despite all the stuff of giving everybody everything, you know, this is a guy that says he wants to cut the defense budget in half and do away with our nuclear deterrence. Now, Kenny, you know, John, you know, Robert, you know, years ago, we would try to paint candidates running against our candidates as being Bernie Sanders, you know. And today, he's raising his hand and saying, no, this is who I am. But the Democratic Party is moving with him. And the people in the Democratic Party who disagree with him aren't disagreeing with what he's saying. They just don't think he can win. But that's the only reason. But he's moving that whole party over there. That's a scary, scary thing for us. So I hope that we will be able to work with whoever the Republican nominee is. This is, how do you feel about restricting immigration? No amnesty, no amnesty, no amnesty. But it's not just a talking point. Amnesty breaks one of the great principles of our government and the United States, which is the rule of law. And once you start saying it's okay to break the rule of law and we're just going to wipe it out, the rule of law becomes nothing. In one of our